Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the April 2022 workshop meeting of Media Borough Council. Thank you for being here. We have quite a crowd. We welcome all. Why don't we begin here? Before we begin talking about anything else, just a thought from my fellows on council. How does May suit you to start meeting back in the large conference room as opposed to here?
That works for me.
All right, so beginning May workshop, assuming things are not crazy out of control, we'll be back in the large conference room. All right. Okay. So, well, as always, we have public comment privilege before. We do, I believe, have a presentation. So I'd like to see if we can get to that first. Do I understand that correctly, Walt and Linda?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So rather than have you guys sit here for longer than you need to, if you guys want to come to the microphone and tell us what's on your mind, just tell us your name, your address, and what's on your mind. And Linda, are you here on item G number 2, the B City USA?
Yes.
Okay, good.
My name is Linda Colston. I live at 6 Foxcroft
Why don't you come closer to the microphone? We're having a hard time hearing you.
6 Foxcroft Lane in Middletown Township, and I'm also president of Media Farmers Market. Addie Cinella and I had founded it 12 years ago now. So I'm here to talk about Bee City, and I understand Borough Council and members wanted to know what Bee City was. So Bee City actually is under the Xerces Society, and the Xerces Society was founded by Robert Pyle, and he's a Yale School graduate, and that was back in the 70s, and in 1988 it was incorporated in Oregon. The Xerces Society is named in honor of a now extinct butterfly, the Xerces blue in California. Xerces Society is a hands-on international society, and it's a nonprofit. It protects invertebrates through conservation of their habitats. They collaborate with the federal government and state agencies, including the federal government is USDA, scientists, land managers, and educators and citizens. Key area for the Xerces Society is pollinators, endangered species, and reducing pesticides and their use and their impact. So Bee City, a woman named Phyllis Stiles began Bee City in Atlanta, or I'm sorry, in Asheville. It's very prevalent in Atlanta now too, in 2012 in North Carolina. In 2017, she approached the Xerces Society to talk about joining forces. And in June 2018, the Xerces Society officially adopted Bee City and Bee City USA and Bee Campus USA. And Phyllis joined the staff to smooth the transition. Currently, there are 81 cities and 68 colleges in 2021 that are members of the Xerces Society. So I'll take your questions if you want. I'm sure Borough Council may have some questions on what Bee City will do in media.
Well, I'm sure that this is a matter that's going to be discussed in greater detail once we get to that portion of the agenda. But Mark, any questions or comments you'd like to make now?
Linda, if you could just outline what is being asked of the council and how this will impact Borough would be wonderful. Thank you.
The council would sign a resolution accepting Bee City, and what we would do is to create pollinator habitats. I think we'll be working through
Yes. So I'm Walt Kressler, the chair of the EAC, and we've had ongoing conversations amongst Linda and as well as Mike Green about the possible impacts that this would have, and have laid the groundwork for possible passing of the resolution. And it has the full backing and support of the EAC. When we would be the point of contact by the borough to make this happen once the resolution is perhaps passed by the Borough Council.
Thank you.
One of the things that I had noticed in reading the plans for media is the residents were very concerned about habitat fragmentation. And I believe that one of the things that Xerces Societies and Bee City promotes is establishing pollinator gardens in small towns and cities to try to connect those corridors so that there is more forage for bees and butterflies. Also, by creating pollinator habitat, it says on private land, and increasing the abundance of native plants. I have a certification in ecological gardening from Mount Cuba and have quite an in-depth knowledge about native plants, and I'm very willing to work with residents and teach them how to plant. And I was also very interested in helping to take care of the 2 rain gardens that really need help, and I think we can do that in collaboration with some of the families and children and maybe do some teaching there too. Reducing the use of pesticides, and we had talked about that at our meeting, and using IPM, integrated pest management, to work with media. And I understand that you really don't have a routine spraying program or anything like that, so I think that really fits into what Bee City is all about, is just not doing massive spraying without any purpose, and to just do it when the need is when the need exists. Incorporate pollinator conscious practices into city policy. So maybe asking the borough in their newsletter to talk about Bee City, and maybe one of our members or myself can write a short article for that, just teaching people how to protect pollinators and maybe reduce the spray of pesticides, including mosquito sprays and things like that, which actually are not as effective with the mosquitoes, but do kill all the pollinators, the bees and the butterflies. Host pollinator awareness events, and that's something that I think we can do very well. Open streets, we can always have a table there if we are permitted. I think the farmers market is very willing. Our manager, Mary, is very anxious to host tables at the farmers market to educate people, so I don't think that that will be a problem. I think we're talking about a garden tour and media possibly next year that we're working on, so those will be kinds of events when we can educate people as well. Publicly acknowledging Bee City USA affiliation with signs and online presence. So again, in the borough newsletter, and letting people know that we're a member of Bee City. They ask that there be one sign put somewhere, either on borough property or at the city property, whatever community is involved, and to let people know that they are a Bee City affiliate. And then pay an initial application fee, which is $100. And I think the EAC said that they were willing to pay that small fee. That fee is based on the number of residents in any particular town or borough, and I think we have under 10,000 residents in media, so that would be the lowest fee. And then apply annually for a renewal of that Bee City certification. And at that point in time, at the end of the year, I can write a small report to Borough Council, and I would need to write one to Bee City to allow them to understand or inform them on what we've done throughout the year. So how is it implemented? The Borough Council would sign the resolution. We would pay the fee, and then I already have a couple of people who are volunteering for a small committee, appoint chairs and co-chairs, a volunteer list, and I think we can ask for that in various ways, and especially at the farmers market, we're going to have a sign up for people. Set meeting dates for plans of fundraisers, additional signs and things like that, and then establish a calendar to do those things, and then the annual report at the end of the year.
Thank you, Linda.
I would also like to add that the establishing pollinator gardens in media is also, it conforms with page 46 of the Media Bureau Open Space Plan.
Well, thank you, Walt. You'll appreciate this. What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening.
Okay.
It is.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any wish to present anything to Borough Council? Karen, do we have any requests for public comment go to the floor by way of email? Okay. Good. All right. Anybody else wishes to address council? Please come to forward. Tell us your name, your address, and what's on your mind.
Robin Lasserson, 342 West 4th Street, co-chair of Keep Media Green. I'm here because we see that the open space funding referendum is on the agenda, and so I wanted to address council again on this issue. We're hoping that tonight's discussion can lead to council and Keep Media Green supporters getting on the same page about the role that residents can play in the effort to save the last remaining acres of open space in the borough, namely having an opportunity to vote on the issue. The beauty of a referendum for council is that either it would give council a clear mandate to implement the open space action plan that you adopted in November, which calls for an investment of $3 to $10 million over 3 years, or if voters vote no, it would relieve the public pressure and allow council to approach the issue in a much more relaxed fashion. Tonight, we're hoping to hear a fulsome, substantive discussion among all of you, hopefully not a reiteration of the arguments which I confess we view as weak tea excuses made by Brian and Peter at the January meeting. We do not believe that there is any danger of an open space funding referendum resulting in a fund that has too much money, especially if it were structured as a borrowing measure with a specific goal. Nor do we accept that having a dedicated fund authorized by the voters would somehow lead to land price gouging that would cripple the borough's negotiating stance for purchasing land or conservation easements. As if the Strine family or Broomell's Lake Country Club doesn't already know, one, that the borough has ample access to capital at low interest rates, or two, that there's public pressure to reserve open space in the community. That's just public knowledge. As you know, hundreds of other municipalities have authorized and passed open space referendums, and apparently these other towns did not view this as an obstacle. And although we respect your public service, we don't believe that Media Borough Council has some special wisdom on this subject that extends over and above many other elected bodies in Pennsylvania and around the country that have made this commitment. We're very interested in hearing what you have to say tonight, but actions do speak louder than words. If you have some secret plans to solve the open space problem, then please reveal them to us or implement them soon. Because right now, the legacy of the Centennial Woods decision is what is governing the dynamic around this issue. A woods with a 100-year-old oak tree with incalculable value as a wildlife habitat and as an oasis of natural beauty for humans, and very calculable value for stormwater mitigation, temperature reduction, and carbon sequestration, was sacrificed to McMansions when it could have been purchased and preserved. It was an opportunity consciously rejected by the previous council. Passing an ordinance to authorize a voter referendum to borrow funds to save open space would be the clearest path toward healing the wound of Centennial Woods and to looking together toward a future that finally includes a plan for investing in the green infrastructure we need.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to address council at this time? Please come forward. Mr. Martin.
Certainly,
Well,
Mr. President, thank you. Good evening. My name is Bill Martin, 203 East Front Street, right across the street from the ball field. And that is the reason why I'm here. You may recall that I was here a month ago. You had an issue on the table with regard to seeking money to do green space and do green, plant trees and so on and so forth. I mentioned that along Front Street, along Front Street on the third base side, we're talking about the third base side of the field here. There's a row of, I don't know if they're yew bushes or whatever they are, and I mentioned that there were some vines there. I go and tear vines out. Some other people go and tear vines out. But we have an issue with the field. You know what it is? The borough has a 99-year lease from the school district. But when you ask who is responsible for the maintenance, they go like this. Because there's times when the borough cuts the grass, and there are times when the school district gets involved and makes the diamond presentable and so on and so forth. Now, shortly after I was here, 2 trees were cut down right in front of our house, which blocked the light, they blocked the dust. The dust? What do you mean the dust? Well, guess what? There's people over there, both Media Area Girls Softball and the Pencrest Girls Softball team, They have a golf cart there. They drag a piece of fencing around, cyclone fencing around. It creates a tremendous amount of dust, a huge cloud. Goes on the teachers' cars, depending on which way it's going, goes on the teachers' cars. We asked, could you please use water? They said, oh, yeah. This was last year, 2 years ago. Yeah, we'll use water. We have yet to see anyone use water there. And we are close enough that we can see just about all that goes on there. So anyway, a couple of weeks ago, 2 trees disappear, and big holes are being dug. Now there's structure down there for a dugout on the third base side for the Pencrest softball, girls softball team. When I asked Mr. Mayor about it earlier this evening, he didn't know anything about it. Now this guy, I don't know if there's anybody who knows more about softball than Mayor Bob, but didn't know about it. So some emails were sent, and I would like to know what became of the questions that my neighbor asked about what happened. Did they come to you? What's going on? Are they building a stadium? It's completely inappropriate. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you the one reason why it's completely inappropriate. I'm not going to mention the 200 days of school that we have right in that neighborhood. I'm not going to mention the 40 days of the farmer's market that goes on there. I'm not going to mention the 200 softball games that go on at the Media Girls softball, because that's all fine. Pencrest softball plays 7 home games, and for that they have to build this structure. You know what that structure is going to become? It's going to become a locus of nonsense that goes on there every night during the summer with the teenagers, down there doing what teens do. We have very little support in terms of security there. And now we have the school district is going to build something. Have you ever heard them bitch about unfunded mandates? The state says something, they don't give us any money for it. They're building something down there. It's going to be a locus for teen activity, and there's no security provided for it, neither by the borough nor by the school district. It's an outrage. When you called them after the emails that were sent, what did they say?
So I don't know that anybody called them, but you're right. The borough did not know that this was going to happen.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Nothing came of that email that was sent?
Yes.
Nothing. Zero.
No, allow me. So the borough did not have any advanced knowledge. The first time that we knew about this was when we got the email from you, Jack, and Grayson. So based upon that, I believe the next step was that Jim Jeffrey sent an email to the school district to get more information about what was going on there. We got some information about what was going on there, but it appears as if that the school district skipped a step. It's an accessory structure under our code, and they needed to file an application an application for a permit, which they did not do. So what can I tell you about? We didn't know about it until after you knew about it.
Let me tell you something else then. They thought so little of this job, they didn't even bother to let a contract. They have maintenance people doing it in their spare time. So that's the kind of respect we're getting. That's the kind of respect they have for the job. And our neighborhood is buried. I mean, people, help us out. You're going to go 40 more, 25 more Sundays for the farmers market and all that. Come on, help us out a little bit. High school sports belong at the high school. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
And Bill, I can fill you in on some things.
Please do. Is it going to go away?
No.
Great.
One, it is a ball field. Two, I will disagree with you, and I think the idea of youth sports in the borough is a... You spoke, give me my opportunity. And this isn't a great debate, but I mean, I think it provides, it provides other kids within the community to see what organized sports can do. The reason for this canopy / dugout is it's mandated by the school district. I did find that out. Under Title IX. For those who might not be aware of Title IX, whatever facilities are provided to male sports people need to be provided to female sports people. That is why the school district is basically putting a cover over an existing area that they would have the players sit. It is the intention of the school district to replant, but I also agree with you that those trees got whacked with whatever that vine is that I think every single person in the borough has growing somewhere in their property. And so, yeah, I would hope that we, the borough, can do something to enhance the greenery along there. Because as you well know, because you've lived there for a long time, that for several years, the greenery was quite thick, quite dense, and was doing a relatively decent job. Over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, whatever that vine is has come in and basically taken the bottom half of those trees. And I think that was discussed previously, that the idea of either rehabbing and or adding additional plants is something that we could do. So, one, the permit thing, I myself am not sure if it would require a permit. If it does, I got to be candid, I look at the school district as another resident or neighbor. It would not be the first time that a resident built an accessory structure that did not have a permit and then obtained the permit. I know that the school district is more than willing to pick up the cost of whatever the permit would be. So I think that we will add the tree. I like the idea that I think the borough needs to do some additional planting just to make it look better, if anything. But I will say my personal opinion is that I think the idea of seeing high school sports, particularly ladies' high school sports in the borough, is a plus. So, and that's just my opinion as a resident and as one member of this borough council.
They gotta, that's fine. They gotta bring the kids down, they gotta bring the kids back, they got safety and security on the way back and forth. All the equipment is up at the high school, but you think it's a good idea to bring it all down here. I understand, Paul, but let me say, I take a little bit of issue with you talking about me speaking against youth sports. Because that is completely, because if you know my record,
I
Paul,
didn't say that.
you know that I've
All right,
spent 20
gentlemen,
years
let's
in
not have any arguments.
20 years at CYO and 20 years on the swim team at Broomall's, like, or 25 or 30. But anyway, so I take a little bit of, that's kind of a little bit of foolishness when I hear that. Secondly,
I gave you facts. That's all I did. I gave you facts
okay,
of why the
all right, let me talk
school
about
district-
Title IX then. Let me talk
That's
about
all I
Title
did.
IX. If this is the umbrella that we have to do this because of Title IX, I'm well aware of what Title IX is. Everybody is. We get that. That's fine. They belong at the high school. They don't belong in the middle of the field. When they said, we need a batting cage and that's all we need, they got the batting cage. When they said, we only need the bathrooms, that's all we need, they got the bathrooms. Now we're going to put up a dugout because it's all we need because we need it for Title IX. Let me tell you something. Half the game, the team is out in the field. Every person at practice is in the field. The utilization of that cover will be very, very small.
I wouldn't
Thank you,
necessarily
Bill.
disagree, but that's truly.
Very, very small.
That's
All
not
right.
even to be addressed with the school.
Why don't we move along then? Anybody else wish to address council at this time, please come to the microphone, tell us your name, where you live, and what's on your mind. Seeing that there are no takers, we'll move along then. Borough Manager's Report. Ms. Foreman.
Good evening. I have just a couple of items to share. The first is around a training. Delaware County is offering an emergency management training course, and it's actually required training for senior administration and elected officials in order for the borough to maintain its eligibility for federal disaster relief funding. So our emergency coordinator, Jim Jeffries, highly recommends that actually the entirety of council, along with the mayor, takes this course as a refresher, but it is essential for those who have not taken it before at all. I will be taking it myself. So the dates and times are not exactly set yet, but there will be an evening and a daytime session, and the course will be 3 hours long. It's like a high-level kind of course, as opposed to doing a week-long course like they used to do back in the day. So please, if you can, I will shoot you an email with the details, if you could, which has like the course description, but if you could let me know whether or not you would prefer an evening or an afternoon session, that would be very helpful. The second item that I have is that, as many of you know, we talked about it last year at council, and the Media Historical Society disbanded, and they have officially closed their bank accounts, and they're actually donating the remaining funds to the borough in the amount of $7,622.77. And we certainly want to thank Kitty McFarland and all the volunteers over the years with the society who have helped to maintain the Minshaw House and to help to celebrate media's history. And as I know, the Properties Committee is going, along with council, is going to be thinking about the future of the Minshaw House, but meanwhile, Borough the administration, the Public Works Department will continue to maintain that. And actually, I don't know if you saw those emails, there's actually some preservation work going on the outside of that property right now. Yeah, so I just wanted to update you about the Historical Society and the funds that they are donating to us. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Brittany. Any member of council have any questions for our manager? We'll move along then. Engineers report, Mr. Mattson.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few updates. Last week, we had the bid openings for 3 projects. It was the roads and highway maintenance contract, the sidewalk maintenance contract, and then the improvements to the armory. I'm happy to report that the armory contract came in under budget. I'm still reviewing the one contractor because I'm just not familiar with this contractor, so I wanted to make sure that their references were adequate. And the bid openings did occur during a vacation that I was on, so I didn't have enough time to prepare a response for tonight. We also did receive the permission from the OHCD to move forward with the reposting of the Orange Street LED project. Again, there was a fair amount of administrative hoops to jump through with the county, but I'm happy to report that we'll be able to repost that this month with a recommendation at the May meeting. We do have a meeting scheduled with PennDOT for the final walk prior to the installation of the audible pedestrian signals. Paul Lutz, who's head of the signals at District 6, will be walking with us on April 12th, 1 o'clock, and the contractor to make sure that everything is copacetic as far as their permitting requirements. In addition, PennDOT will be letting the contract for the countywide paving, which includes the entire repaving of Baltimore Pike, next week. They anticipate having a bid opening for that project in May. So we're on target for the repaving of Baltimore Pike sometime during the summer. Unless there's any questions, I did submit a written report with 15 capital projects. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mattson. Anybody in council have any questions for Mr. Mattson? Thank you again. Mr. Ewald, sitting in for Bob Scott, who's the customary presence in the solicitor post. It's your turn to deliver your report.
It's always a pleasure to be here, but Mr. Scott did not send any report.
Does any member on council have any questions for our solicitor? Seeing that there are none, we'll move along then to the mayor's report. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The background checks continue for the top 6 candidates for patrol officer. We're getting closer. The chief has not given a deadline for the competition to end because he wants to make sure they cover all the bases. I guess we remember about 5 or 6 years ago, we had some candidates that were, thank God, we really...
Leave it at that.
All right, yeah, we had some bad ones. So, let's see. On Tuesday, April 5th, at approximately 3:15, a robbery occurred at the Wawa in the 400 block of East Baltimore Pike. While the ATM machine was being serviced, an unknown actor implied he had a weapon and committed the robbery, stealing an undetermined amount of cash. So, hasn't been caught yet. Chief and I were talking about this afternoon earlier. I didn't know he was going to put that much in this, but at that time. But yeah, it's the first time we've had something like that in years that I can remember. The new vendor for security of the borough, for the borough cameras, has been updating them, and the chief states that the updates are remarkable. There is still work to be done in order to complete the project. And Kevin, I'd like you to also comment on this.
Sure. This is consistent with the proposal that we received from Phoenix Security System. Much thanks to them. Their crew has been very active, making sure that our security system is up and operational. This was the flip from the radio system to the fiber optic. So now the system runs over the hardwire fiber optic system. And again, I think that both the Lieutenant Egan and the Chief are very, very happy with the results.
Yes, they are. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does anybody have any questions for Bob?
I was going to address it to Bob, I think I'm going to more address it to Kevin. Do we have the ability to expand the cameras? I mean, for putting more cameras up in different locations now that we're using fiber optics?
Certainly. The contractor contacted me this morning and has a number of different ideas, and I said, before we get ahead of ourselves, we have to make sure that our existing system is operating the way we want it, and then we can move on to phase two. Absolutely. And again, as they were doing the improvements, Paul, they made sure to build in a loop system so that if any portion of the fiber optic line goes down, there is a redundancy. So yes.
Any other questions for, well,
No.
these are for you, but,
For anybody.
all right, we'll move along then. We'll move along to the council committee reports. Paul?
Yes, good evening. Relatively short. The first on my agenda is referencing a license agreement for 111 Manchester Avenue. For those that might not know the address, it is the home to the left of Manchester Park. They are adding an addition to their property. Their property could hold all the stormwater that they could keep all the stormwater on their property, but they did come to us because of the park being next to their property with the idea that some of the stormwater could actually be used to help water the park, water the plants, things of that nature. We have touched base with our solicitor. It is the type of thing that I think we can move forward with. If it does not work out, the property owner has already said that the way they're setting up their property, that if it didn't work, it's literally redirecting a handful of pipes back into onto their property. But if they're willing to give us some water, we have the land there. It's better than just having it sit in a concrete basin until it goes into the stormwater. So I think it's worth our while. So at the legislative meeting, I'll make a motion that we ask our solicitor and our manager to work with the residents to put together an agreement in which we could then vote on at a later date. Number two.
Paul, just one
Sure.
brief interruption. Rotary has taken a particular interest in that park. They've sort of maintained it, so they'll just be informed at some point along the way.
Yeah, so the Rotary Club, which has been doing a fantastic job with Manchester Park, has actually been working with this gentleman to use some of his water from time to time. So he's been helping out in the past summer, so that
Perfect. Good. That's great.
And the other thing I was going to ask is whether or not you're just going to ask the solicitor to do it, to bring the license agreement to the legislative in 2 weeks.
If he is ready, I'll be ready.
Yeah, he was just waiting.
Be ready.
He was, well, Bob was just waiting to kind of get the sense of council, and then he said he could put together that agreement for 2 weeks from now.
For the newer members of council, I mean, we enter into agreements such as this, I don't say on a regular basis, but places where businesses may be using part of our sidewalk, places that might need a handicap ramp that's on borough property, i.e. another sidewalk. So we do this with the idea that if at any time it doesn't work out for the borough, we have the ability to rescind that agreement. So it's nothing that we're locked into for forever. Does that answer most everyone's questions on that? Number 3 on my agenda is one of my regular items, getting rid of equipment. So we have anyone who's interested, we have a great 2002 trash truck that will be going up for municipal bid. You can use it for a camper, you can use it for all kinds of things. But we have historically, over the last several years, been using municipal bid. The other item that we do have, and I will do a little sales pitch on this, is a 2005 Kubota tractor. That is in excellent shape. Even some of the pieces that are additional equipment that's attached to the tractor really has been used minimally. So if a resident's interested, the place to go is municipal bid, and it's interesting that usually you can get a pretty good deal for a pretty good price. The tractor has been maintained. I actually have a photograph of it, and it looks as new as the day we got it. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested, it will be posted on municipal bid, and you'll be able to pick that up. Last on my agenda is really, again, this is for workshop, it's not legislative things. The fire company right now is in the process of going out to purchase a new ambulance. Ambulance is about $200,000. And the interesting point is because a fire company is not part of the borough, they're not eligible for governmental loan requirements. So what that really means, they would be having to pay a 4.8% loan on the fire truck, whereas if it is purchased through the borough, which would be one option, that it would be a 4 or 2.6% interest rate. One of the areas that I would ask finance to take a look at is the possibility of us loaning the fire company the funds, not interest-free, but at the same rate in which, or a little bit less, than what we'd be getting through a governmental, or through a governmental loan through a financial institution. It's not giving the money away, it's lending it out and getting 2-something% back. Right now, that's probably a better rate of return that we're getting on any of our investments. So it'd be something that if Peter Finance could think about, I will find out how quick you would need to think about it for their purchasing purposes.
What was that? What was the amount again, Paul?
$200,000, 2 years. They're able to get a 4.6 if it was either put through our name, which would still be their truck, but basically it'd be through our name. Then they would be eligible for the 2.4 or 2.6. Or as I said, we could look into doing a loan to them from reserve funds and then getting that money back plus a little bit of interest.
Isn't the library arrangement a precedent for this?
Peter never thought of that, but that's a pretty, yes.
I mean,
it is.
however that was structured as a
Yeah.
pass-through loan,
It was.
I think that would be I know it would work legally. The difference here, the only thing I really wonder about is that it's actually a small amount of money for a loan. So I wonder about the expenses of the loan itself for what you get. And the Finance Committee can talk about it, we'll consider it, but it's not an unreasonable request on their part, and there is a precedent, a larger one with the library.
Great, thank you. That concludes my report.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions for Paul? Joy?
Hello. Let's see, for personnel announcements, we are going to consider the digital media communication policies for Media Borough, and that would be including links from informational announcements that would be featured on our website, approved social media sites, emails on special events, and through our monthly e-newsletter and emergency response systems. And that digital communications policy would also include things that I guess things that are not allowed. So
That's a good way of putting it.
yeah. So that's the update for personnel. Brittany, did I leave anything out? Is that like?
I think that's exactly
Okay.
right. The only thing I'd add is that this was helped drafted by our communications consultant, Linda Rooney, also using some of the digital policies that are recommended by the associations, like the boroughs associations, and this is exactly what Joy just said, and I think it'll be helpful, and we also want to be transparent, so we put the policy, if you guys adopted it, we put it on our website, so that people, outsiders, will know what types of things we will put on our website, what types of things will go through social media and our newsletter.
Great. Yeah.
Something we need to do with social media and communications changing at light speed.
Yeah, it's important to stay current. I guess one other thing I will say is, I know we're about a week out from it, but March 31st was the International Transgender Day of Visibility, and I want to remind everybody that media is everybody's hometown. That's it.
Well put.
Thank you. Any questions for Joy? Liz?
Good evening, Council. I want to discuss parking at 217 West Baltimore Avenue, which you probably more commonly know as the parking lot that's in front of the Wells Fargo location. A little bit of context until I get to the point that I'm actually asking you for. So buckle up, strap in for a ride. If you've had the opportunity to speak to any businesses in the last couple of months, particularly businesses that get a lot of their revenue on nights and weekends, they likely would have communicated to you some of the stresses of parking that have been even more stressful the last couple of months, particularly as the Media Townhouse has stopped their agreement with that parking lot to allow visitors to park there on nights and weekends. And now, if you park there, you will be towed. And if you have sat at the townhouse at night, you will see that they probably tow 3 or 4 cars an hour at an unbelievable efficient rate. And the lot is about 35 to 40 spaces. And while that may not seem like a lot, it is putting a lot of pressure on other spaces within the borough. I mean, to be towed is not a great visitor experience. So we really don't want that to be the thing that we're remembered for as we are starting to welcome visitors into our town. And we see some of our businesses are starting to pick up their business, which, we obviously want. So on a whim, sort of spoke out loud, is there an opportunity for the borough to take over that space? That from what I understand, the townhouse moved away from it because they did not want to take liability for the lot. However, Media Borough has a lot of insurance, more insurance than God. So we started going around and sort of asking some questions, just really exploring this topic, if this is a possibility to sort of take this over. And, Paul Robinson had a conversation with Bob Scott, our solicitor. From a legal perspective, we were able to do that. Spoke with Brittany. Brittany spoke with our insurance broker. Our insurance company offered to cover that space at no additional cost to the borough. We simply would need to tell them what the agreement is. We spoke to Jim Seaman of the finance department, and there is a potential to actually get revenue from this spot to sort of, have this potentially be an incremental source of revenue, similar to like any spot would be, maybe not enforced, but we would certainly collect the money perhaps. Really the next step to potentially offering this as something our visitors could use on nights and weekends and relieve some of the pressures that we see our businesses and our residents would be to speak to the property manager. We have a contact. I'd like to have a meeting with them and see if there's an opportunity to engage in some kind of agreement to allow the spaces to be used after hours. Before I open this up for discussion, I want to underscore the fact that I am not saying this is going to solve all the parking in media. It is not. What it is low-hanging fruit that I think could be a very quick win and start to relieve some of this pressure as the MBA and other committees explore parking on a more high-level and strategic point of view. So I just want to sort of have that be the expectation, but I do think that this is low-hanging fruit. I think this is an easy, it has the potential to be an easy win. So I wanted to open that up for discussion.
Liz and I were working on this, and, I see this, the most important thing that I saw out of this is bad press, as Liz just said. Somebody comes to the town to have a good night, and they go back to their car at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and it's not there. So the first thing that they have to do is then find out where it went. Then I believe it's $125 if it's there for X hours, plus the towing. This is something that, as Liz and I did our homework before we came to council, it's not going to cost the borough anything. It'll add additional parking spots. Literally, to generate revenue is nothing more than the signs that we've all become familiar with, referencing the different zones in which you would use our kiosks. And so literally, it would be signs placed on that property saying X hour to Y hour, this is borough proper or borough parking, and go to the kiosk, which is right on Veterans Square. And so it's, we're not saying we're going to generate a tremendous amount of revenue, but it would not be a revenue loss. And if anything, it would be additional parking. And the biggest factor is we wouldn't have to worry about on social media, my car got towed away for media, because they're never going to go into the details. We all know that. They're just going to simply say, I went to media and my car got towed. I think this is a win-win. Liz and I did not want to do anything with regards to talking to the property manager. He is a true old-time media individual. I do not think there's going to be any issue with him and/or the property owner if we were to move forward with something like this.
May I ask, please, what is the "it" exactly that you're going to do? You're asking them to revive the agreement the townhouse had, but instead the borough would be the leasee, essentially?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And I'm not sure if there was ever a legal agreement with the property
But
management.
nevertheless, you're going to pursue a lease agreement with after hours with the owners of the property?
Exactly.
Correct.
Sounds
Very
great.
candid, if they come with some crazy number, it's pretty much done.
Well, you know, to the extent that the borough would be making revenue from that, particularly if the property manager knew that, if this is a public meeting, they might, if they were wily, ask for more, if they knew that we were going to make money off of it. The other, nothing, I'm just saying, the other thing that strikes me is that the property owners talk, restaurant owners talk, and to some extent, we are subsidizing the townhouses' refusal to accept their own parking problem. But that's okay, because it helps a bigger problem. So that's a sidebar comment,
And
really.
here I understand that that is literally what, with the townhouse, the rationale was, it's not just the townhouse.
Yeah,
And I know
that's right.
From,
That's right.
people that have told me stories that when it hit the townhouse, that cars were literally being towed, people were leaving the townhouse and hitting other restaurants on State Street because it's not just the townhouse. Yes, it's directly across the street, but it's a place that people knew that they could park, and so it wasn't just the townhouse. And I do believe that's a rationale with the townhouse. It's not, if they could say it was their private parking, that would be one thing, but it was not private parking just for the townhouse. And patrons of other establishments do in fact use, or did use that as a parking place.
Okay, well, those, I mean, it's comments. I think it's a great idea.
And I do think the property manager, Liz and I,
We'll need to find that
we'll
out.
twist his arm as much as possible.
And just for the record, or not for the record, whatever, the MBA is willing to work with the property manager to offer, for example, a sponsorship to Dining Under the Stars or social media, some, sort of low-level ways to sweeten the pot, because, we're all on the same team, we all kind of want the same thing. So we'll see. But want to make sure, we have a couple of our ducks in a row. One home really raised this, and just Kevin and I sort of briefly spoke about this earlier in the week from a public safety perspective, and I don't think you really raised any red flags on that either.
No, and that's one of the hot areas where there's huge parking issues, so it certainly adds a little bit more help, and maybe people hearing that might make them feel a little bit better. So anything that we can do, I think, is a good thing. It's a start.
Yeah, we have heard some reports that there's been additional pressure on South Ave as of the last couple of months, specifically because, well, for many reasons, but one of them is because this parking lot is really no longer available, and so people continue to go down the road. Again, the MBA is exploring other ways to improve parking for businesses. This is just one very small potential win on a broader sort of strategy, but we need a little bit of time to build out that strategy and tactics. This is something that we could potentially implement sooner than later. By the way, hopefully, in time for a busy 2022 event schedule, which will, really start sooner than later.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Of course.
I understand that there's a need for parking. People love to, have a convenient place to park in media. It's not a very it's not a very big town. But there are like 3 nearby transit lines. So could this also be a way that the MBA could work with SEPTA to, I guess, get people to understand, to use the trolley more and the bus lines more, and also to help increase service and to increase ridership for SEPTA, since they're kind of, trying to get that going, and since the townhouse and other restaurants are right on State Street and like kind of right next to transit stops, they can kind of work together and, tell people, don't worry about driving, just take the trolley, because, if you're going to a place that's selling a lot of alcoholic beverages, you might want to, take a break, get on the bus and,
Yeah,
work on something like that.
the NBA and I absolutely agree.
And SEPTA Key, and maybe offer some discounts and work with SEPTA and just say, you will get a discount on this cocktail. Instead of it being $10, it can be, $7 if you show your SEPTA Key.
Well, it's illegal to discount alcohol in the state of Pennsylvania, despite what you see, but yes, there certainly are incentives. Listen, Joy, the NBA and I acknowledge that SEPTA is part of sort of an education puzzle, right? If you walk around the borough on a Saturday night, and I live 2 or 3 blocks away from it, there's plenty of parking where I am, but people don't know that 2 blocks away, and I think visitors get intimidated by one-way streets and the trolley, and that there are
Media is a
door
great-
dashers and that are double parked on. There's a lot to unpack for sure. I believe the NBA is aware of a lot of these challenges and aware of some of these solutions. We just need some time to package them up into a communication plan so that we can educate the businesses, we can educate the visitors on some of their options that maybe aren't as obvious right now. But I think, this SEPTA solution is one of many for sure.
Yes, please let them know that SEPTA's there and, just.
Absolutely.
And it will help the environment too.
Agreed.
Any other questions for Liz? You're off the hook, Liz.
For now.
Yeah. For now.
Thank you.
All right, so I have a few items to talk about. The Planning Commission didn't meet this month, so I have nothing to report from the Planning Commission meeting. Item number 2, this is an agreement with the county for installation of kiosks on county property around the courthouse. This will be part of the wayfinding project. It's been in the works for a number of years now. It is a program that has majority funding from outside sources, and it's a way of placemaking as well as providing directional signage that will help folks figure out where to go and how to get there. And not only just a destination, but also parking, which, as we know, can be a problem at times in media. So part of the program is to have kiosks that we placed around courthouse grounds so that visitors to the courthouse could look at the kiosks, get a sense of what's available and how to get there. In order for us to place the kiosks, we will need to have an agreement with the county that essentially hold the county harmless from anything that might happen. A kiosk tips over and lands on somebody, as unlikely as that could be. Nonetheless, it's standard. So that's what item number 2 is about. Any questions about that? Okay. Item number 3 also is something that's a long time in coming. This is, for a number of years now, we've been thinking about the Plum Street Mall. I think that there is a widespread belief that it needs a little bit of a refresh. A number of years ago, it was identified by a group of borough stakeholders as perhaps the best place to have a project that would establish it as a place and also a place that people would like to come visit. And out of that, there came a preliminary concept design, which is available on the borough's website. If you want to take a look at it, it's been sitting there for a number of years. Over the past few years, we've been fortunate enough to gain grant funding that would support roughly about 2/3, do I have that about right, Brittany? About 2/3 of the cost for the final design. And that's what number 3 is about. It's a proposal from NV5. NV5 is the group that has worked elsewhere in the borough. It has done the Diamond Park by Veterans Square. It has also done Heritage Park at 5th and Broomall. They have a very good sense of what works in media, and they were interested in working on this project. They submitted a bid. I think the bid is roughly about $150,000. Is that in the ballpark, Brittany? Yes. Okay. So 2 weeks from tonight, I will make the motion that we approve their of their bid for the final design, bid specs, et cetera. Any questions before we move on to the next?
Brian, if you could maybe just explain a little bit more, because when you hear the $150,000, you're thinking of just the design.
Yeah, you're right.
A lot of
I
it
apologize.
is utility work, underground work. It was a road, and I was off by
50 years ago.
It was a road until 1972, so we got to figure out what's underneath Plum Street Mall. So it's not just somebody sitting down with a coloring book and going, oh, let's put this here, put that there. There's a lot of utility work involved in it. So I'm like the idea of having somebody do that. I'm still a proponent that when we, the residents, should just figure out what we want there as far as appearance. Where a set of chairs might go might be a great idea, but I think we can do a better job on figuring out what really fits the town than, don't like to use, but an outsider. Plum Street Mall was originally designed and built with a handful of people over a course of 2 or 3 Saturdays, figuring out what they wanted to do, and it's been around for a while, so I guess it was somewhat successful. We have a tremendous amount of great people in this town that, just as far as what the appearance will be like, I think would be better served by having us, at the right time, create a group to figure out what kind of furnishings go there. But I fully support the idea of someone needs to do the hard part.
Yeah, Paul, I did a poor job of selling it tonight. I apologize. We've been living with this for a number of years. It's the one block. It's the block between Jasper and State Street. So that would be the central block, the one that I think most people, they come and visit and hang around and, just hang. And it's been in need of some work for a number of years now. It's quite an interesting project. There's a lot going on in a small space. It is a model for how a densely packed town like Media can do some environmentally forward things that are really pretty neat. So I think that this will be a great project. It'll be the start of a redo of the entire 3-block stretch of Plum Street, and one that I think that in the end we'll be very proud of. Item number 4. This is a grant application for Jefferson Street traffic calming. And this is actually the step before we would go out for an RFP. This is an application for a grant so that we can get some work done that will identify problem areas on Jefferson Street, whether they're utility poles or bump outs or what have you. And that will help identify where the street calming features would best live on Jefferson Street. Brittany, I don't recall what the amount of the grant was.
So the application will go in between 50,000 and 100,000. There's no match required from this year, so this is 100% grant funding. And you may recall that there was a number of items that came out of the traffic calming plan for Jefferson Street. And they were wonderful concept sketches. And so the idea with this particular grant is to take it from concept sketch to like an actual feasibility plan. So when we say we want to reconfigure the intersection at Lemon and Jefferson, like let's actually, do more of that engineering work so we can get it ready just to go out to bid, right afterwards. And so so this is going to include geographical surveys, identification of things like utility poles and pipes and trees and hardscape, and it will really help facilitate the final design that we need to go out to bid. So.
And it's truly a worthwhile project. As we all know, Jefferson Street has been an area of great deal of concern for residents, not only of Jefferson Street, but many people in Media. It's a highly trafficked street. It can be difficult to get around, and the thought is that there are ways that we can slow traffic down. And this will help us identify the best ways to slow traffic down on Jefferson Street. Item number 5, a little bit inside baseball, written guidance on council committees, a paper that we circulated among each other that suggested our roles as members of council committees or head of council committees or as liaisons. It's something that we circulated, I believe, a couple of months ago, and we've asked that there be, anybody, if they have any comments, to please share them with us. I believe, Paul, that you have shared your written comments. Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else has any comments, but Paul, if you'd like, if you discuss your comments or criticisms?
Well, no, I mean, I don't think there's criticism, and to be candid, I mean, I was asked to do that because both Brian and Peter asked. When I originally sent it, it was my intent that it was going to Brian and Peter. I did not know until recently that it got distributed to all the council. I think for us, it might not be a bad idea if we put together a subcommittee of people to take a deeper dive into it, not so we take up, or workshop sessions to have long discussions. I think what I haven't seen is I think our committees are good, but I think what we need to do is to find a little bit greater structure to determine, who does what, when, how certain projects would be, either assigned or given to certain committees versus, well, I kind of think this fits X, so I'm just going to hand it to this committee. So a little bit more structure there. And also the fact that, with me in Public Works, I can sit there and say, hey, I want to go buy a brand new truck, but until finance says we have the funds for that truck, I can't do anything about it. So there are the things I think we need to sit down and just put a little bit more structure, I guess, to the idea of committees. For most people here, committees are the only thing that they've been accustomed to. Committees have been around since, I guess, the early 2000s, but prior to that, the borough never had committees. They had individual council members assigned to either the police or Public Works, and the committees were a committee of the whole. So an individual who was in charge of Public Works would come back and discuss all the public work issues with all the council, and all the council would make a decision. Since we've had committees, it basically goes to 3 members of council that do the heavy lifting, and then when it comes to all the council, it's more of an overview of what the committee has discussed. I think it's I kind of like the old way. I'm fine with committees. I just think we need to structure things a little bit more so we know what lanes we're in, and to make sure that we don't get out of the lane that we're supposed to be in. So I would encourage us, Mr. President, that you take a look and put together a subcommittee that we can do a deeper dive into it and come back at some later date with recommendations to council.
Well, thank you for your comments. Any comments, reactions,
Yes.
thoughts?
Yeah, I actually put some comments into the document, but I don't think anybody saw them. But yeah, thank you for sending that to us. And is this goal, what's the goal of this structure? Is this structure meant to expedite processes, or is it going to get us to the same goals in the same amount of time? What's the whole difference of that? Since I'm newer to council, will this cause us to have more meetings, less meetings? Say, for example, if I'm sick, or if I'm not able to to attend a meeting, if we're just doing a single person for each thing, does that mean to get canceled, or does it do we have to wait a little bit longer until the next meeting?
Well, individually, that would be the case, but
yeah.
with committee, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, some committees meet if there's 2 out of the 3 members. Other committees, if the chair can't make it, then the committee gets rescheduled. So there are the little things that we need to say, well, how's this work? Or I will also sit there and say that currently the way we have things set up is the president assigns the committee and the president assigns the chair. Most committees that I serve on, you create a committee and then the committee determines who the chair of the committee is. There are the little things that I think we could do to actually improve the system that we currently have. Will it be quicker? I don't know. Will it be a little bit more structured and detailed? I think that will be the key. So I think we'll know what we're doing and then be able to pass the ball off to I hate to say it very often, to finance, because most of the things that any of us want to do cost money, and unless finance says we have it, or we can get it, that's important. And I think that's one of the other areas, because there's times where it's kind of been, we jump to, we're going to do this and go find the money versus finance being able to say, great idea, but we might have to wait a year because it's not in our budget for this year. So they're the things. I just think it's, I think we could just have our committee assignments a little bit structured, a little bit stronger than the way it currently is.
Could we try it with like certain committees, like if one committee can go one way just to test it out and then decide, and then they can decide on which structure that they would like to take?
I'm up for anything.
Any other comments? Well, where do we go from here, folks? So I think that this written guidance, it's a page and a half or so, was done just to give sort of a very broad overview of what committee members and liaisons do. It was more a way of kind of acclimating new members of council to expectations in serving in those roles. I don't think, Paul, that it was intended to be a way of structuring or rethinking the entire structure of councils and committees. It was more a matter of, you're new to council, here is a piece of, here's some information that we think will help you understand better what's expected of you as a member of a committee or as a liaison. So, I mean, I almost think that there's like different conversations going on here, and I don't mean to. I think that they're equal. They can be equally valid, but Mark.
Paul, I very much appreciate what you're saying about committee of the whole and bringing things back. But my take on what we have with committees is that the committees do the heavy lifting. We, though, are a committee of the whole to make any formal decisions. So that, and I understand what you're saying as far as how it would go, where somebody would report back and you'd all talk about it and I'd go with it. I think circumstances in 2022 are significantly different probably than they were 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And I know that I do not have the time to sit up all night listening to report after report after report about those committees. That's just me. I also understand, that the old system worked well for you and you're familiar with it, and I think we can learn from you more strategic ways to deal with the committees. So I guess my question, I was, before I was a teacher, or actually between my two teaching stints, I was an operations guy, and we dealt with processes, procedures. Would a hierarchy, would a listing of what the committees are responsible for, sort of a diagram of what falls under the bailiwick of CDC or any of the other committees, maybe that would be something that would be much easier for a new council person to digest instead of just a bunch of words.
Yeah, and as we're saying, for the record, I had no intention of us going back to the old days. I mean, I think it kept all members of council more advised. Because what now does occur, and it's just part of committees, and I've gotten used to when someone comes up and goes, what about X? And I'll sit there and go, I don't have a clue, because it's not part of my committee. At some point, I will be aware of it, but right now, no, I don't know. But what you were saying as far as responsibilities and things of that nature, no, I think it's important so that we don't, we just don't sit there and say, well, someone goes, oh, I want to do this, well, that's going to now be part of my committee. If it's something to do with properties, it can't be shuffled off to another committee or another ad hoc. It goes through properties. If it's a personnel issue, it has to go through personnel.
Well, there's an example tonight. There's an item on my agenda that is not really EAC related, and we just didn't know where to put it. But I'll bring it up when that comes up. So I think having that identified is an excellent idea. I think identifying when something comes in, we can work with the manager or the president of the council and say, what would this fall best underneath?
that would be fine. That would be a great start. Since you're
If I
an
can-
operations guy, you someone already just volunteered,
I just did, yeah.
Congrats, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Paul.
okay?
You know how to find me.
Yeah, I know.
Liz?
Listen, I think if you've been doing anything for 20 years, it makes sense to dust it off, relook at it from a fresh perspective and say, is this working or it's not? My only concern is that I've only been doing this thing for 3 months, that I don't know what works or what doesn't, because I'm too foolish to know otherwise. I only say this as like, I don't know what I can contribute to the conversation, because I'm still so new to all this. I don't think I have the experience to take a step back and say, you know what, this could work better, this couldn't. So I'm all for re-looking at it. For me personally, it might be a little early, but maybe in 6 months, I'd be in a bit better position to be able to contribute to that conversation more fully. So maybe it's,
I'd be
yeah,
more than
this
happy to wait
this
6
makes, well, that's great, thank you. We're all very positive towards the future. So, like, maybe we relook at this in whatever, 6 months, September, whatever, something like that. I would feel more comfortable to contribute to that conversation, but
Sounds like a
that
great
just might be
idea.
me.
So we're not in a hurry. We certainly can wait some time to get a better sense of where things are. Another good thing about this is this is it's sort of an informal guidance paper, so it doesn't require any action from council to make changes as we gather wisdom or, I'm sorry, Kevin, did you wish to add something?
I do, if you don't mind.
Yes,
Mike, that's
please.
okay. One of the things about this discussion that I really like is, over the years that, again, I've been lucky to enjoy this position, the borough has adopted so many different types of plans, right? Open space plan, traffic calming plan, stormwater plan, and those plans, they really do align with various committees. So, and again, a nice audit of what lives where. Brittany has done an incredible job of bringing those plans to certain places, because those plans contain promises that we've made to ourselves, and it keeps us accountable to make sure, again, it's really the administrative staff to make sure that we're looking at all these plans and honoring all the promises we've made to ourselves. But again, an audit of this, making sure that none of the action items or projects or things that we'd said we were going to do fall through the cracks, I think is great. It helps me do my job a lot better if there's an audit to say, a couple years ago, 3 years ago, we had a kind of a project that was between the cracks, and there was a little bit of a discussion, I remember this was kind of funny, about where it belonged. And again, it was eventually given a home. But again, to loop through those plans, I could rattle through them, I won't bore you, but just to make sure that we're not forgetting about promises that we've made to ourselves is, again, something that I think would be hugely beneficial.
What a wonderful segue to item number 6 under my agenda. But it is a point worthwhile thinking about. If anybody cares to read through the entire Open Space, Parks, Recreation, and Bicycle Routes Plan, there's a listing there of open plans in the borough. There are 14 of them. That's a lot. And we're committed to executing on all of them. So maybe that it does make sense to add a little bit now to this working paper, just a kind of a list of the various committees and generally speaking what they do, and perhaps a thought about where some of the plans ought to live. Just kind of organizing it now, and we can come back to it at some later time and see how this lines up with our thinking and our experience. So nothing urgent. I heard 6 months, which puts us in October. It seems like forever and a day, but it's not really. It'll get here, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. So, Brittany, when you find a spare time, the 25th hour in the day.
Well, I think actually October's not a bad idea at all, because if we want to change something, say in January for next year, that will give us plenty of time to think it through, and there are potential for new council members in the next 2 years. No offense to anybody. But that's something that could happen, and having that in place over the next couple of years is probably not a bad idea at all.
Okay, we made it through. All right, so item number 6, I take it that a fair number of people are here because of that. It's our discussion of a voter referendum to fund open space. And if you're here, welcome. We appreciate you being here to listen to our discussion. I wrote down some comments because I've been a little bit under the weather, and I'm afraid that I'm going to lose the trail of my thoughts, so bear with me a bit. Are we good, Dave? All right. Am I hitting my mark? Excellent. So let me begin here. We value open space and parks and media. That's why we paid for this right here, this open space, parks, recreation, and bicycle routes plan. That's why one of the final acts of the previous council, at the end of last year, was to adopt the plan. Now we have a much clearer understanding of what our residents would like to see in their community. Oh, we have heard them say, more open space, if we can do it. Continue with our tree canopy efforts. Advance our developing bike network. Upgrade our parks and recreation facilities, among other things. As with all of our plans, we are committed to make them work. As our engineer just referenced, we have, I think, 14 that are currently going with the borough. It's a lot, but that's how we do it. And it's been a part of our recipe of success in Media Borough. The issue is not whether to protect open space. The issue for us is how best to fund that effort. I'll repeat that. The issue for us is not whether to fund open space. The issue is what's the best way to fund it. Okay? We all know that nothing good comes freely. Land is no different. And land and media, especially recently, has become increasingly dear. So recently, all of us on council received a letter from the leadership of Keep Media Green. The letter let us know that Keep Media Green was advocating for a referendum question to be placed on the ballot this November on the issue of whether the borough should increase the local property tax in order to buy open space. Keep Media Green favors that approach. Folks, this is our opportunity to have a discussion. Thank you. Previous council did not address how best to fund open space acquisition. That decision is up to us. And we have 3 new members. So we should have a discussion. Fortunately, one of our colleagues, Peter Williamson, is very knowledgeable on the topic of open space funding. Peter worked at the Natural Lands Trust for, I think, 30 years, maybe 30 years plus. And he helped facilitate the purchase of land to preserve as open space. I've asked him to prepare his thoughts on what he considers to be the best fit for media as to open space acquisition. Peter?
Okay, well, I'm happy to talk, but I'm only one of 7, so my opinion, I'm sure, matters 1/7 here. I do have a background in this. I did spend a lot of time on this, and I find it just supremely ironic that I'm in a position of arguing against the very, very passionate citizenry arranged here in front of me. But I have to reiterate what I think Brian already said, is that and I think everybody that's sat up here for a while, fully understands how important open space is to the citizenry of our borough. We understand it. And we're willing, and we also understand that you're willing to spend more money to protect it. It was very clear from the survey that was done. But I just don't agree with the idea that this particular way of going about it is the best way to go about it, and for a variety of reasons. Most particularly because we're a dense borough, and we don't have a lot of open space opportunities. We have a few, and a few very important ones. We don't know when those opportunities will be most beneficial to pursue and seize. So I think the best way to be prepared is to simply be prepared the way we are. We have millions of dollars in the bank and an excellent credit rating. And we regularly talk to open space prospects in town so that we know when and if we may be able to pursue them. I think that's the appropriate method here. I don't think tying the hands of the finances of the Borough of Media for a set period of time. The numbers, I think, were something like $3 to $10 million were proposed. That's a significant amount of money for every citizen of Media to pay if they happen to be a property owner, because it's going to be reflected through the property tax. That's the only way to pay for it. The other thing that these referendums tend to do, when they're set up at their best, they allow the money to be used, 25% of the money to be used for the stewardship of any acquired properties. 75% must be used for acquisition. In my opinion, this borough has to invest in the personnel and equipment necessary to run a complex park system, as much as it needs to acquire new properties, if not more. So that cannot be addressed sufficiently by a referendum. So the last thing I'm going to say, really, before turning it over to my fellows, is that we live in a representational democracy. It's a small town. There's 5,000, 6,000 people that live here, but every couple of years, the citizenry here elect people to represent them, to make decisions that they essentially farm out to us to make. Because they're complicated, and they involve all sorts of trade-offs. I think that committing this much money to a particular priority of the borough, $10 million is equal to a whole year's worth of budget. $3 million is a third of our budget for a year. I don't think the priority is properly placed. I'm one of 7 people. I've sat on the finance committee for probably too long, but 20 years. So I've seen all sorts of waxing and waning of borough funding, and as much as my heart would love to say, oh, sure, let's just spend all this money on open space, I just don't think it's the right thing to do. Thank you very much.
Peter, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely, Paul.
This is, because of your background. I was not aware that 25% could be put away for maintaining. In your experience, that 25% eventually runs out. What has other municipalities done? I mean, so you sit there and say, cool, we got $400,000 that we can put away for, quote, maintenance. At some point, that's going to run out, and you still have the responsibilities to maintaining that property. What have you encountered?
Well, it depends on how how it's set up, Paul. Sometimes there's just a continuing percentage of property tax it's like a special tax.
Okay.
So, that can throw off money every year, perpetually, presumably. Other times, the question is, borrow money to do this thing and fund it through property tax, right? But in that case, then you have it for a set amount of time, and then if you don't use it, you have to send it back. So there's different ways to do it, but in the end, any municipality that acquires new open space has to accept the fact that it's going to cost them more in public works, whatever. Remember when this place first came on? I don't even think we had a lawnmower when we bought this property.
To be very honest, we had small backyard lawnmowers, and until we bought this, then we had to go, you can't cut this place with, so yeah, you're right. You had to go buy a real lawnmower.
So, when we get to, we're going to have a very complex park in Plum Street. It's going to be beautiful. But eventually it's going to need serious maintenance, right? And so, as a borough, when and I'm willing to, get these whole things into the capital improvements plan and so forth, but we have to accept that they do cost money. That when you acquire open space, there's costs that go with it. Especially in a dense place like this, because you want to program it. You want people to use it as much as they can. because there's a lot of people here. Anyway, I've been talking too much.
Thank you.
Well, only because we've been asking you questions. If you don't mind me peppering you with a question.
Certainly, go ahead.
No, I think, actually, Mark, I think
No, I
that...
have questions, I have things to say.
Okay. Peter, as finance chair, I think you mentioned a borrowing. And we've done borrowings in the past in the borough, whether it's in support of the library or in support of work that we've done on the Olive Street garage. Heck, I think that we did it for the work on State Street 25 or so many years ago. It's worked well for us, it seems to me. It's been a good model. Do you think that at present the borough is well positioned to make a borrowing? Should we identify property that the owner is willing to sell to us? Is our credit good enough, do you think?
Our credit is excellent. It's fabulous. And I would have said, yeah, absolutely. I would have said that 6 months ago to you and not even blinked. Today, we may be approaching an inflationary environment where, borrowing money next year is going to cost us more than borrowing money this year. To be honest with you, that's the case. Municipalities, regardless, though, will always have excellent rates, interest rates, compared to the general borrowing. You saw that with the fire company discussion earlier. But the cost of money could conceivably go up over time.
Mark, I think that you had some comments.
Yeah, I actually have quite a bit to share. And first of all, let me just begin by thanking any one of you, and many of you I know are sitting in front of me who sent postcards, have voiced your opinions. I appreciate your concerns, your willingness to reach out, and for those of you that included a note, your time and effort and your thoughts, I thank you for taking that time. And again, it's only fair to explain why I can't support a referendum now. They're not excuses that I'm going to give you. They're simply my read of the situation, again, one of 7, and what I think is in the best interests of the borough. Media is small. We know it's 487 acres. I did some calculations when I got some messages from Keep Media Green about other municipalities that are purchasing land. The only one of those municipalities that was measured in square acres is Media. The rest are in square miles. I'll have more on that in a little bit. There's currently no open space on the market that has someone willing to sell it to us. There's absolutely no guarantee that a landowner would be willing to work with us in the future on this type of sale. I don't want to put the borough or future council in that position. Should no property become available, I don't know what happens to that money. If we were to get a referendum, get the money, and then nobody wants to sell it, or we're not able to, make a deal. If we add a tax via referendum, which is really what this is, on top of what already is there, it may have significant unintended consequences. It can only be undone through another referendum. It may lead those on fixed incomes to leave media entirely, sell their property to maximize their profit. It could very well embolden the property owners to ask for the exact amount that's budgeted. I think it's only fair to say if we put a price tag on what we think open space is, people looking to sell open space, they're not morons. They're going to look and say, oh, look what we can get. It leaves the borough and it puts Media Borough in an extremely poor negotiating position. I disagree with you on that. I know you mentioned that you don't agree with that, Robin, but I think it does. The most important piece here, there are other options besides a referendum. We can simply impose it. We could agree, raise tax, and put that in our budget. We can, and I think we should, do what Peter said, which is to use our strength of borrowing power and work with landowners in the long term. If a situation arises in which there is a willing partner that offers to negotiate with Media Borough for land, I will be the first one to recommend that we enter into negotiations to use our leverage our borrowing strength to secure that space at a mutually agreeable price. At that point, we can put a referendum before the voters for that amount of money to borrow for Media Borough. Borough elected officials are well aware of the parcels you have mentioned. We are well aware, and we are entrusted to make these decisions, as Peter said. Negotiations can be delicate. Relationships take years to develop. I don't think anyone would want Michelangelo to begin a sculpture with a sledgehammer. And if you go in whole hog like that, I think that's what you run the risk of doing. We have an excellent credit record and more than willing to borrow the money needed should that right situation present itself. West 6th Street, as 6th Street, which I was not on council for. I don't know how I would have decided because I wasn't privy to all of that information. At the time, it was simply not something Borough Council felt was worth the investment at the cost the developer proposed. So I just want to share with everybody and keep media green, because I know you read the messages, I've read the messages. There was a message a few weeks ago about Charlestown. Charlestown is 12 and 5,200 square miles. Okay? They are purchasing $4.1 million, purchasing for $4.1 million for 182 acres. That's roughly $22,500 per acre with a willing partner.
It was a conservation.
West Town, 8.3 square miles in area, $20.8 million for 208 acres at a price agreed upon. The referendum comes after that agreement. That's roughly $100,000 per acre. 115 West 6th Street was $1.5 million for just a little bit more than 1 acre. That price was not right, not even close. So that's where I am, and that's where I ask you just to see that we are not against open space. It's just not the right way, and it's just not what I can support at this time. There may come a time where I can. I just can't do it right now. I've looked into it, I've researched it, and that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody else that wants to weigh in?
Yes.
Sure, Joy.
I won't be very long with this, but I just want to note that we're in a climate crisis right now. So what I'm really going to do is, what I really want to focus on during my council run, I do want to focus on ways that the borough can help mitigate those efforts in protecting the environment, and that's why I want to make sure we see through to the bike planning and work on getting some more bike lanes in media, get more people to ride bikes and walk more instead of using their cars, maybe use your cars less. Just want to put out this tidbit from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It says the tools to stop catastrophic climate change are in our hands, and just the couple ways to use them is to promote more walking and cycling, using electrified transport, reducing air travel, as well as shifting to plant-based diets. You do what you can with that. But we have some of the tools in our open space and bike plans. So I think we should do more to focus on making media green in that way. And honestly, I also agree with Mark and Pierre. I'm not sure of any current properties right now that are even available for us to even go forward with it. And I also want to put a note on how there's also a housing crisis. So when you make things scarce, when you make the housing supply scarce by going to councils and say, we don't want more housing in this place and that place, anything that becomes available becomes very, very, very expensive and out of reach for millennials like myself. And I'm so lucky that I got priced out of Philadelphia to move to media. Isn't that something? What a concept. Now, that was like 10 years ago almost. Now I could not even imagine to even afford to come out to media because of, there's like nothing available. So, like I said, once something becomes available in such a crunched market, it becomes very, very expensive. So, I just can't support a referendum right now. That's just me. So, that's it.
I'll say a few, but I've
Well, it's
said
kind of weird. I'm the one that really hasn't made my mind up yet. I'm more the detail person. You know, I think all the information that was brought out tonight is very valid. I mean, I don't know of any properties that is up for sale and/or where the property owner is interested. I think it's important that we take we need to look at the details. It's very easy to sit there and say, let's go borrow, just rounding numbers off, between $5 million. But then you got to recognize that, as Peter referenced, you got to maintain that forever. You also lose property taxes on that property forever. There's a lot of things and I think it's important that we keep referencing the plan that was just approved in November, December as the open space. I think the word recreation's in there as well. So I think it's important that we take a look at and really do the deep dive into, well, what are the costs to buy? What are the costs, if we are to acquire property? But also, what are the costs going to be if we're going to do the changes to the Borough Hall facility here? Discussions on doing other recreational things. We need to find out what the dollars are. Because right now, if someone came and knocked on somebody's door and says, do you want open space? I'm going to say the vast majority of people are going to go, yes. But I don't know if that same question was asked and it says, and it's also going to cost you X dollars per year. The answer would be yes. I don't know if we have those answers yet.
I'm sorry, this is our turn to discuss. Thank you.
And that's not part of the referendum. The part of the referendum is to say we're going to borrow X dollars, period. I think it's important that we do know the details on what that's going to cost, not just to borrow the X dollars to buy the land, but to say forever your taxes are going to be going up. I think another part that we haven't discussed really is we only have so much opportunity to generate revenue. All our expenses are going up, so it's not just saying, oh, we're going to buy open space and everything else is going to stay the same. Every single year, every one of our expenses are going up. So we have to take that into consideration. So I've not made a final decision. I'll be candid. I don't think we would have the data for a referendum for November. I don't know if that would be necessarily a hindrance to the Keep Media Green, because I don't think there's a property out there that would be for sale within the next year. My belief is we need to do a deeper dive. We need to find out what the recreational improvements would cost, what open space would cost forever, what we're going to lose, and then we'd be able to give a better idea to our residents on what they should anticipate with regards to, an ongoing tax increase. So I hate to say it, we would just be we'll put more work back on borough staff, but once we get some better numbers, then I think we can make better decisions. But every single thing my other members of council said tonight are legitimate. I mean, I don't know, and I do this, I don't do the Natural Lands Trust, but I do borrowings and working with local governments for my job. And the majority of the conversations I've had is, this farmer wants to keep this property as open space. And that farmer wants to work with the community to make sure that, we're in a little bit different of an environment because most of our properties here, as everyone has said, is very desirable. I'm not saying no. I think we need to do a deeper dive. So I would be one of those ones that would probably, I'm not sure, depends on what the motion would be, but I'm not sure how I vote.
Paul, if I could just piggyback on what you said about, the annual cost. One thing I didn't mention is the median household income for media is $77,708. The median household income in Westtown is $122,000, and they have twice as many people. So they have the population of media that's earning 50 grand more than most of the people in media are. The median household income in Charlestown, which is comparable to our population, is $140,179, nearly double what the median household income is in media. So I don't think we can make an apple to orange comparison between those purchases and what we can do here in the borough. I've met on the campaign trail people who are on fixed incomes, and I cannot imagine asking those individuals to put more money up from their paycheck when they've had their property reassessed. All of us had that. And it's not that I don't support open space. I just don't think this is the time to do it or the way to do it. So, thank you.
This one I've thought a lot about and struggled a lot about because I really share the goals of everyone with open space, and a lot of you have brought forth great data and have all this really great experience. For me, what I struggle with is actually a lot more simple, which is, what if it doesn't pass? We have a strategy here. The council has a strategy, the borough has a strategy to acquire open space. This plan was adopted, and some money was put against that plan, certainly not enough or not significant, but it was symbolic and it's a start. Sorry, I'm getting upset because I just thought about this so much. The council is putting together the blocks to move forward with an open space acquisition. There are relationships that are being built, there are conversations that are being had. There are, people who are making sure that our finances are solid and stable so that if there is an opportunity, a loan would potentially be able to be acquired. Brian likes to say, or has said, the pace of local government is slow, and it is very, very frustrating. But this is a strategy that seems to be going in the right direction in the short amount of time that I've served. My fear is that the tactic of a voter referendum does not align with that strategy. That potentially this could go out there and it could get voted down, and it could actually hinder a lot of the efforts and the strategy that's set forth in the open plan. And it feels very weird for me to say, maybe we shouldn't consider the voter voice. And that's not how I mean it, but what if this doesn't pass? What if it doesn't pass, and where does that bring us? The strategy that we have outlined is moving forward in the right direction, certainly a lot more slowly than any one of us would like, but it is moving forward. So I worry that a voter referendum would take us off that course. That's what I struggle with.
Other comments?
Well, I just had one point, and from what I understand, a referendum is something that you do when you have a specific goal in mind, and other than just general open space, we don't. I mean, the ones I've read about, there's X number of acres that need to be purchased, and you get the voters' approval. We don't have that, and I think it would be irresponsible for us to go out and do this without ever having anything in mind. So in my opinion, a referendum would be misguided because it's not really the best way to go about doing what we want to do at this point. So that's my 2 cents.
What I've heard from my colleagues tonight is that there is a commitment to open space. What I've heard from every single one of my colleagues tonight is that we are all interested in open space. The question, as I said before, is not whether. The question is, how do you do it? There appears to be a fair amount of doubt that a referendum is the best way to do it. And I share those concerns for a number of reasons that have already been expressed, and one that I don't think we've really hit upon. But I am persuaded that a borrowing is a superior way of making a purchase to a referendum, where if there is a property that we think is a good fit for the borough, we can borrow the money. It will happen quicker. I understand Robin's point that perhaps there's some advantage to that the Borough Council could feel relieved of pressure if voters vote in favor of a referendum. But I think to a person, we all agree with what's in this plan. We have significant public input to this plan over the course of 2.5, 3 years or so. And we listened to what our residents had to say. We're not going to turn our back on this plan. That's never been our intent. Our intent has always been to do what the recommendation is in the plan summary. Target the largest parcels of vulnerable open space to acquire in sync with the determination of the amount of investment for which the borough can assume reasonable debt and obtain grant funds. Recognize that this requires working with landowners and developing good relationships with them. That takes time, a lot of time. I share the concern that's been expressed here today and that I heard at a finance committee last year. What happens if we raise the money by referendum and there's nothing to buy? And here's some numbers for you. You can easily do this on your phone. A $10 million referendum would be over 5 years. It's roughly 2,500 households in the borough of Media. That works out to $800 per year per household. That's more than double what the average property tax is in Media Borough. It's a lot of money. When we have a much more flexible tool, a borrowing, why wouldn't we use that as opposed to a referendum? Referenda do have their time and place. For example, just recently, 2 years ago, Middletown Township purchased a bunch of acres of the Slayton property. Westtown Township just put up a significant amount of money for purchase of a conservation easement. I think it's
Cray-Billy Farm.
Cray-Billy Farm, that's right. I think that Natural Lands Trust was involved in that. But in both of those cases, there was a defined property, a defined amount, and then subject to a referendum. To me, this is kind of putting the cart before the horse. Last thing, this has just come from my perspective, it's what I do in a day-to-day job. If we were to have a referendum, the wide world knows how much money we have in our pocket and for what reason we have that money in our pocket. It is very difficult to negotiate with somebody when they know that you really want it and they know how much money you have in your wallet. That's one of the effects of having a referendum. You don't have those problems with a borrower. So, anybody else have any further comments? I think the takeaway here from all of my colleagues is that this is something that we are committed to do. We have already begun doing it. It will take time because of the nature of these discussions. They cannot be held in public. As my colleague Mark said at his first meeting of council, there needs to be some trust here. I think that you have a council in front of you that has commissioned 2 public parks within the past number of years, about 5 years or so. We've commissioned this study. We continue to work on environmental issues. We take it seriously. So, I think that we've reached the end of my report.